Chapter 13. Vicus and Solove arranged to have some sort of private war meeting with the bats. "Do you need me to go along?" asked Gregor. It was less that he thought he could contribute to the meeting, and more that he felt safer when Vicus was around. Being stranded on top of a pillar surrounded by hundreds of bats made him a little uncomfortable. And who would be in charge if anything came up? Luxa? That was no good. "No, thank you, Gregor. We will be discussing battle position for our forces, not the efforts of the quest. We shall not be absent long," said Vicus. "No problem," said Gregor, but inside he wasn't so sure. Before they left, Vicus's big gray bat murmured something in Luxa's ear. She smiled, looked at Gregor, and nodded. "Probably laughing at me, saying I'm a warrior," thought Gregor. But that wasn't it. "Euripides says you're bruising his sides," said Luxa. "He wants me to teach you to ride." That bothered Gregor. He thought he'd been doing pretty well for a first-timer. "What's he mean I'm bruising his sides?" "You hold on too strongly with your legs. You must trust the bats. They will not drop you," said Luxa. "It is the first lesson we teach the babies." "Huh," said Gregor. Luxa had a way of putting him down even when she wasn't trying. "It's easier for the babies," said Marith quickly. "Like your sister, they have not yet learned much fear. We have a saying down here, courage only counts when you can count." "Can you count, Boots?" Marith held his fingers up before Boots, who was busy trying to tug off Gregor's sandal. 1, 2, 3. Boots grinned and held up her pudgy fingers in intimidation. "No, me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 10, she said, and lifted both hands in the air at her accomplishment. Henry scooped up Boots and held her at arm's length, the way someone might a wet puppy. Boots has no fear, nor will she when she masters counting. "You like to fly, do you not, Boots? Go for a ride on the bat?" he said mischievously. "I ride," said Boots, and wiggled to get out of Henry's uncomfortable hold. "Then ride you," said Henry, and tossed her right off the side of the pillar. Gregor gasped as he saw Boots, as if in slow motion, sail out of Henry's hands and into the dark. "Henry!" said Marith in shock, but Luxa was cracking up. Gregor staggered to the side of the pillar and squinted into the darkness. The faint torchlight provided by the bats illuminated only a few yards. Had Henry really thrown Boots to her death? He couldn't believe it. He couldn't. A happy squeal came from above his head. "More!" "Boots! But what was she doing up there?" Gregor fumbled with his flashlight. The beam was strong and cut a wide swath of light through the blackness. 20 bats were wheeling around the cave, playing some kind of game of catch with Boots. One would take her up high and flip her over, sending the toddler free-falling to the ground. But long before she reached it, another bat would scoop her up gently, only to rise and flip her off again. Boots was giggling ecstatically. "More! More!" she ordered. And each time she landed, she would order it again. And each time they dropped her, Gregor's stomach lurched into his throat. "Stop it," he snapped at the Underlanders. Henry and Luxa looked surprised. Either no one had ever yelled at these royal brats, or they hadn't seen Gregor lose his temper yet. He grabbed Henry by the front of the shirt. "Bring her in now." Henry could probably cream him, but he didn't care. Henry put up his hands in mock surrender. "Take ease, Overlander. She is not in danger," he said, grinning. "In truth, Gregor, she is safer with the bats than in human hands," said Luxa, "and she's not afraid." "She's 2, screamed Gregor, wheeling on her. "She's going to think she can jump off anything and be caught." "She can," said Luxa, not seeing the problem. "Not at home, Luxa, not in the Overland," said Gregor, "and I don't plan on staying in this creepy place forever." They may not have known exactly what he meant by creepy, but it was pretty clear it was an insult. Luxa raised her hand, and a bat coasted by, lightly flipping Boots onto Gregor's arms. He caught her and squeezed her tightly. The Underlanders were no longer laughing. "What means this creepy?" said Luxa coolly. "Never mind," said Gregor. "It's just something we Overlanders say when we see our baby sisters being tossed around by bats. See, for us, that's creepy." "It was meant to be entertaining," said Henry. "Oh, yeah, you guys should open a theme park. You'll have a line stretched from here to the surface," said Gregor. Now they really had no idea what he was saying, but his tone was so sarcastic they couldn't miss it. Boots wriggled from his arms and ran towards the edge of the pillar. "More, Gigo!" she piped. "No, Boots. No, no. No jump. said Gregor, catching her just in the nick of time. See, this is what I'm talking about, he said to Luxa. He stuffed Boots into the pack and heaved her onto his back. The Underlanders were baffled by his anger and stung by his tone, even if they couldn't understand his words. Well, it was not Boots who needed the lessons anyway, said Luxa. It was you. Oh, abandon the thought, Luxa, Henry sneered. The Overlander would never give himself to the bats. Why, when he returns home, he may forget he's no longer in our creepy land and jump from his own roof. Luxa and Henry gave an unfriendly laugh. Meredith just looked embarrassed. Gregor knew it was a dare, and one part of him itched to take it. Just run and jump into the darkness and leave the rest up to the bats. Another part of him didn't want to play this little game. Luxa and Henry wanted him to leap so they could laugh at him flailing around in the air. He guessed they both hated being ignored, though, so he gave them a look of contempt and walked away. He could feel Luxa positively steaming behind him. I could have you thrown off the side, Overlander, and have no one to answer to, said Luxa. So, do it, said Gregor, holding in his arms. He knew it was a lie. She'd have Vicus to answer to. Luxa bit her lip in vexation. Oh, let the warrior be, Luxa, said Henry. He's no good to us dead. Yet. And even the bats may not be able to compensate for his clumsiness. Come, I will race you to the pitch pool. She hesitated for a moment, then ran for the edge. She and Henry launched into the air like a pair of beautiful birds and vanished, presumably on their bats. Gregor stood there, hands on his hips, hating them. He had forgotten Meredith was behind him. You must not take what they say to heart, said Meredith softly. Gregor turned and saw the conflict on Meredith's face. They were both kinder as children, but when the rats took their parents, they changed. The rats killed Henry's parents too? Said Gregor. Some years before Luxa's. Henry's father was the king's younger brother. After the Overlanders, the rats would most like to see the royal family dead, said Meredith. When they were killed, Nerissa became as frail as glass. Henry, hard as stone. Gregor nodded. He could never hate people very long, because he always ended up finding something sad out about them that he had to factor in. Like this kid at school everybody hated because he was always pushing little kids around, and then one day they found out his dad had hit him so much he was in the hospital. With stuff like that, all Gregor could feel was bad. When Vicus arrived a few minutes later, Gregor got onto his bat without a word. As they took off, he realized how tightly his legs clutched the bat's sides and tried to loosen up. Vicus rode with his legs swinging free. Gregor let his legs go and found out it was actually easier to stay on, more balanced. Now we must visit the crawlers, said Vicus. Do you wish to continue dissecting the prophecy? Maybe later, Gregor answered. Vicus didn't press it. He probably had plenty on his mind with the war and all. Something else was eating at Gregor now that he had his temper under control. He knew he hadn't refused to jump off the pillar only to make Luke and Henry mad. And it wasn't only because they'd laugh at him. No mystery why he'd mentioned theme parks. Roller coasters, bungee jumps, parachute drops. He hated them. He went on them sometimes because everybody would think he was a chicken if he didn't, but they weren't fun. What was fun about feeling the world drop out from under your feet? And those rides at least had seat belts.